Welcome to Nomadic Diaries. I'm your host, Doreen Cumberford, and I'd like you to meet my wonderful co-host, Megan Norton-Newbanks.
Hi, Doreen. Hi, everybody.
And you are joining in today to hear another belonging bite. We believe that belonging is such a big topic that we needed to break it down into bite-sized modules. And so this is one of our modules. And today we're going to be talking about food.
Who does not love talking about food? Like, here we go. Let's dive in, talk about all the things that make our mouth water and our tummies full.
Right. Because
Doreen,
after,
let
sorry. Because after all, food is never just about food, is it? It's always about the people who cook it, the place that we're eating it, the origins of it, the traditions. There's so much built into food and belonging, don't you think, Megan?
I couldn't agree more. And even like where it comes from and what's the availability of it and how do you substitute ingredients when you're trying to make that beloved food that reminds you of your grandma, reminds you of the last place you lived. There's so many things about belonging in food. Honestly, I think this is the number one topic about triggers memories of belonging.
Yes. So tell me, what's one food that reminds you of home or a place where you felt like you truly belonged?
Mm. Oh my goodness. I've thought about this question and it gives me pause because I'm like, I really want to talk about the yakisoba I had in Japan or the falafel of Tel Aviv or the Five Roses tea in South Africa. But one tradition that I think has been ingrained in my life and childhood and through adulthood is having afternoon tea. And that I'm drinking a cup of right now. And that is a symbol, that is a practice that reminds me I am home, I am safe. And wherever I have my cup of tea, I'm like, okay, I feel very grounded. And that's something I really wanted to share. And I'm really, really sad I don't have access to Five Roses tea right now in my life. That's a tea from South Africa, a black tea, and you usually have it with cream milk, and you have a biscuit called rusks, and you dip it in, and it's just so familiar and comforting. It's just a simple thing, but that's what I want to share.
I think that was your wee Scottish soul that you're bearing there because in Scotland, everything shows up with tea. Tea cures everything. If you're sad, if you're lonely, if you're wet, if you're hungry, if you've got nothing to do, tea
Yes.
solves everything.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And Doreen, I don't think I ever shared this with you, but I do have Scottish roots.
Yes, doesn't surprise me since you love tea.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Doreen? What is something that reminds you, food-wise, beverage-wise, of home or a sense of belonging?
Hmm. Well, actually, strangely enough, I was thinking about the noodles and udon noodles on a rainy, cold, wet winter day in Kyoto, in Japan. And that was the sort of the pinnacle of belonging in Japan at that time, was finding a place where we could be dry, where we had toddlers. There was two families, and we all had toddlers and where we could feed our children and just belong together in what otherwise was a very strange and unfamiliar environment.
Mm. Mm. Have you been able to reproduce that recipe, that udon recipe in different places
No,
you've been?
not very well. But I tell you what I do reproduce. I I kind of have a little bit of food anxiety in every country I move to. It's like, where am I going to eat? Am I going to like this food? But once I understand how they cook rice, and I learn how they cook rice because I lived in Japan, I grew up with rice pudding in Scotland. Here in Mexico, we have our own version of rice, and then, of course, living in the Middle East. We had
Mhm.
different kinds of rice. So rice has been very consistent during every country, every culture that I've ever lived in. And so once I know this place makes rice and this is how you cook it, suddenly my anxiety about how am I going to feed myself just dissipates.
That is fascinating, and I love how that's a staple in so many
Yeah.
different communities, and the creativity of that staple does look different. It reminds me, I was reading a book by Jeff Shue named Good Soil, and he talks about how even from his grandmother's fried rice to his mom's fried rice had distinct distinctions, and he
Yes.
favored his grandma's way of creating fried rice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And do you have something that is a staple, has been a staple for you in all the diverse, widely diverse cultures that you've lived in?
Mm. Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily from like a social norm that's a food staple, like you said,
Mhm.
rice, but family norm that we had is
Mhm.
my mom's grilled cheese sandwich.
Mm.
And there's a particular way, I don't know how she manages it, but the edges are crispy, the
Mm.
cheese she selects gooey, and the one surprising element ingredient that she puts in is ketchup. And so
Oh, interesting.
yes, and so that has been a comfort food in my family for years. And whenever I go visit my parents, I'm like, can you just make me a grilled cheese sandwich?
Nice, nice. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's amazing how sometimes it's the little things. It's the little bite-sized things that give us that satisfaction for our souls. It's almost like it goes into our cellular parts of our being and connects to our invisible parts of our being, which we might call something like a soul.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, and
I love that.
me too. And it doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to be big. It's those small, meaningful ways that you connect to belonging.
Yes, yes. And so, what role does food play in family or community gatherings where you feel a strong sense of connection and belonging?
I think this is the key to what's the quote? Build a longer table, not higher walls when it comes to neighbors, when it
Yeah,
comes to connecting with community. And so this is a key question of why does food connect us? And I think it's this universal way that we know we're nourishing our bodies and we're nourishing each other by conversation, by presence, and it signals warmth. There's
yes,
appreciation for the effort put into the food, and so words aren't spoken during we're eating. We're just being together while we're
yeah, that's
chewing
lovely.
and swallowing.
Yes,
What
yes.
about for you? What's coming up for you with that question?
Well, I I find that myself, I think about community gatherings in a very different way now. Um, for here in Mexico, we have cultural cross-cultural communities. We have the expat community, and I like it the best, and I feel most at home when there's a variety. I don't feel very much at home when it's always US or always Mexican food. I feel more comfortable and more available, and I feel like I probably am more present when there's across cultural foods around me.
Mm-hmm.
And I
So,
have you ever felt out of place or welcomed because of the food that you eat or share?
mm. Yeah, this question kind of triggers international school lunch times for me. And I think it triggers a lot, I think, for anybody who's grown up in that cross-cultural setting at lunch, at
Yes.
mealtime. and the there can be, you know, sideways glances or even gawking stares at what do you have in your lunchbox? What is the gooiness or the smell or the texture, whatever it is. And that gave me a lot of anxiety, honestly. First days of school at any new school, I went to 7 international schools, and that question really triggers the memories of, am I going to be the awkward one with food that doesn't belong at the
Mhm.
kitchen or the you know, cafeteria table? But yeah, I think nothing, I don't have any trauma stories. Like it wasn't
Right.
super you know, out of place. But I have heard stories from TCKs, from globally mobile families that have children who say that they were made fun of, or they wouldn't
Yes.
eat because they
Yes.
felt so excluded in what they had in their lunchbox. So that is something I would recommend to parents of do the pre-thinking, do the pre-investigating about what the school lunch is, what is the norm, what do people typically eat, and also start making the food way before you even transition to a new country so that the taste buds get accustomed. And so that's coming up for me in this question.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I was thinking about Ramadan in Saudi Arabia when you were talking about that. And I was thinking about how we had Muslim children and Christian children and children from all different ethnicities and backgrounds and beliefs in one classroom. But during Ramadan, it was definitely practiced. The children, I think, could have water, which adults really don't have access to during the day. But I do think it really instilled in the kids a sense of respectfulness and maybe not understanding because I'm not sure how well we always explained it. But you had kids that were fasting. Usually they had to be a certain age, I believe like 10 or 12 before they fasted all day. But when you had kids that were fasting and kids that were not fasting, I think it was a discipline. It was that we are living with this is the rule in this country, and we are going to belong to this country, and we are going to belong to this rule, and we are going to respect it. And so I think it was incredibly powerful to live through that. And I remember we had horses at the hobby farm, and we had grooms who took care of the horses. And the children would go out there to see their horses. And I remember saying, remember, it's Ramadan, and these guys have not eaten all day. And it's very important. The most important thing is that they need the time and the space to go break their fast in order that, and you do not ask them to do anything with your horse. You are in charge. You take care of everything. And I remember all those sort of little mini trainings that we had to give, and it was good for the adults too, because we needed all these reminders. But to me, that was a very, very special part of living in the Middle East. And I'm so grateful that I got to have that experience.
Mm. That reminds me too of my experience teaching English at Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And 90% of my university students were from Saudi Arabia. And
Mm.
as a teacher, during the day, they were not night classes. So during the day, we had to adapt and adjust to different energy levels during
Yes.
Ramadan. And that is a cultural sensitivity to respect who belongs and who is in the classroom.
And I have to say that sharing iftar, after a few years, and we had lived there for a few years, we had some very close friends who were Palestinians. And they were naturalized Saudi citizens, but they were originally, their families had originated in Palestine. And that was the greatest sense of belonging that I have ever built across a cultural divide because we were ultimately, after being there a few years, we were invited to a few personal iftar feasts, and they were feasts. So much food coming out of those kitchens for hours, and listening to their stories and the way that they valued and appreciated life, and it was so different. That was really my best experience of crossing cultures and having a sense of belonging anywhere.
That's so beautiful, Doreen. And that's on my wish list someday, being invited to iftar. That's so wonderful to hear your description of it and your memory of it. Because food does translate as love.
Yeah, and it
And
actually affects us at a cellular level because it is actually digested and transferred into nutrients that that feed our bodies. And so without bodies, we can't exist.
that's right.
There's
Yes.
no belonging.
Yes, yes, that's right. I love is it in Chinese Mandarin about the greeting is not how are you, but the greeting is have you eaten?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, just how food is show showing love.
And in the Bedouin tents, when sometimes we would be out in the desert and you drive up to a Bedouin tent, and the first thing they do is they come out and the men go in the men's area and the women would go in the women's tent. And the first thing they do is they put on that teapot. It's a tin metal sort of triangular shaped pot with a big handle and wildly painted, usually orange and green and red sorts of colors. And the first thing they do is they would never turn anyone away. The first thing they want to know is who are you? And that is facilitated by their version of a tea ceremony. So I think it's very important. Do you have memories like that? I bet you do, of tea in different countries.
Yes,
Or tea.
absolutely. Yes, but one thing I want to share is that I've been to some adult third culture kid retreats and
Yeah.
different reunions, and everybody brings their favorite tea to share. And there's an entire table full of tea from around the world that we get to try and remember those flavors. So in those types of situations or retreats, people say, if you're not a tea drinker, you're not a TCK.
I understand. I understand that completely. Well, this has just been a little belonging bite on the subject of food. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I would like to add maybe an encouragement or an invitation to people who are listening to this about one small way that perhaps you could invite someone to tea, to coffee, maybe to a meal. I think there's a lost art in some cultures, especially speaking specifically from US American culture, the lost art of inviting people into your home for a meal. And if that's been any part of your experience, you know how intimate and growing of a gesture that is for belonging. And so I'm convicted to do this and to offer this to a community member. But I would say do that. And if you invite someone just for a cup of tea, you can say, spill the tea. What's the tea? You might get some juicy gossip about your community if you do that too.
I love that. I love that. And what you're speaking to is that sense of welcome. It's welcoming each other into our presence, and welcoming each other builds a sense of belonging. I just wanted to close this one with my favorite person who talked about crossing borders and food was Anthony Bourdain. And he said, food is everything we are. It's an extension of our nationalistic feelings. He said, our ethnic feelings, our personal feelings, our provinces, our tribes, and your grandma. And I just love that because, as they say in Glasgow, you can't shove your granny off a bus, but you would never turn down feeding a cup of tea to your granny.
Oh, what a saying. Well, time to refill the pot. But
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. And from Megan and I, we'd like to say masalama, sayonara, hasta luego, and anything else, Megan?
au revoir, tschüss, and all the love.